Thank you, Senator Green. We'll now move to question time, and I'll call Senator Patterson. Senator Patterson.
Thank you, Madam President. Now that she's been tipped off.
Sorry, that was not my intention.
That's all right. My question is for the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. On September 23, Optus CEO Kelly Bayat-Rosmarin said to the public of the Optus data breach, "It is a sophisticated attack." On ABC's 7:30 last night, when the Minister for Home Affairs was asked if she agreed it was a sophisticated attack, she replied, "What is of concern for us is how what is quite a basic hack was undertaken on Optus." On ABC Radio this morning, Ms Bayat-Rosmarin described the Minister's comments as misinformation. Minister, who is right here?
Good question.
Senator Wong.
That was to me, wasn't it?
Yes.
That's a pity. I thank Senator Patterson for his question. Obviously, I've just come back from the General Assembly, so I haven't been in Australia for much of, for the events to which he refers. I think Senator Watt is probably more across what has occurred while I've been away, and I think was asked questions yesterday about this. This is an occasion where it does appear, if I may say, that the lack of action by the previous government has come home to roost. When you look at, for example, when you look at the Privacy Commissioner's comments—
Senator Wong, could you resume your seat, please? Senator Patterson.
Thank you, Madam President. On relevance, there were no questions about the policies of the former government, only questions about interviews that occurred this morning and statements of the Minister.
Thank you, Senator Patterson. And Senator Wong has just commenced her answer, and she's heard your objection, and I'll ask her to continue.
If only it were so easy that the failure to manage to govern properly could be simply dismissed in that way. The reality is you failed to act on so many issues, including on the Privacy Act,
Order.
Including on the Privacy Act, and in relation to cyber security more broadly. And as a consequence of the government's failures on this front, Australia is less prepared and less resilient to cyber attacks than we should have been. And you would know that, Senator Patterson, because you are one of the people on that side who understand some of the issues in national security and some of the complexity. And you will know that there was not sufficient attention paid to this issue by the previous government. You will know, for example, that there were recommendations made that the Privacy Commissioner has talked about to strengthen the regulatory framework to provide additional rights for Australians to protect their personal information. And it does not appear that they were acted upon.
Senator Wong, please resume your seat. Senator Birmingham.
President, point of order on relevance. In response to Senator Patterson's point of order before, you indicated the minister was just beginning her response when he drew a point of order that the question was related to statements about this particular cyber attack and which of those statements were correct. The minister went talking about the former government. You indicated she was beginning her answer and gave some latitude. But there are now 12 seconds less. I ask you to draw the minister to the question.
I will draw the minister to the question by Senator Patterson. Thank you, Minister Birmingham.
As I understand it, and my brief is that on the 21st of September, Optus reported a data breach to the Australian Cyber Security Centre. Shortly after identifying the compromise, they took action to contain the incident.
Time has expired. Senator Patterson, first supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. I note the minister did not say whether she supported the minister's version of events or Optus's version of events, but I'll try again. On ABC Radio this morning, the Optus CEO said that this data was encrypted and had multiple layers of protection. On ABC 7:30 last night, the Minister for Home Affairs accused Optus of having effectively left the window open for data of this nature to be stolen. Minister, who is right here?
Senator Wong.
Well, self-evidently, the data could be stolen. So I find it hard that you come into this place, Senator Patterson, and are concerned about the minister saying that when it's self-evidently the fact that the data has been stolen. The data has been stolen, and the government has been working, including with Optus, to try and resolve what has occurred with this data breach. But I think it is an odd thing to do to come into this chamber and to try and play politics on the Sorry, did you want to say something?
Order. It is disorderly to engage across the Senate chamber, and I ask senators to remain quiet while Senator Wong concludes her answer. Senator Wong.
Well, I find it passing strange that you would come into this chamber being upset about a minister making a point that is demonstrated in fact. This data has been breached. The government is, and the minister is wrong that the data has been breached. Well, there you go.
Order. Senator McGrath.
Yeah, I just think that's pretty extraordinary. We know that there has been a breach. I think
Senator
that is
Wong, your
not,
time
that is
has
not
expired. Before I call Senator Patterson, I would ask all senators and remind them that interjections are disorderly and that Senator Patterson has the right to ask his question in silence and Minister Wong has the right to respond to that question in silence. Senator Patterson.
Thank you, Madam President. As part of the response to the cyber attack, will the government expedite passport applications and waive fees of Optus customers whose passport details may have been compromised in this data leak?
Minister Wong.
Thank you. Look, that is a good question, and it is one that comes at a time where we are trying to deal with. Well, I should say that obviously the situation is evolving, and the government is considering how we respond to identified risks, such as the one that you have outlined. And regrettably, this occurs at a time where we already have a lot of pressure in the passport system, and as a consequence of the previous government's failure to plan for the massive spike in passport applications, which occurred because people didn't renew whilst the borders were closed. And we've already, I've been, I think, upfront with the public, and Minister Watts has been upfront with the public. Assistant Minister Watts has been upfront with the public about how we are trying to resolve that issue. But that is an issue that will take time, and we are still dealing with unprecedented demand. And this comes at a time where that's where the system is already under pressure.
Your time has expired. Senator Pratt.
President,
I have called you, Senator Pratt.
my question is to the Minister for Finance and the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. Can the Minister detail the global economic headwinds that the Australian economy is facing?
Senator Gallagher.
Thank you, President, and I thank Senator Pratt for the question. Last night, the OECD revealed analysis outlining the significant downturn they are anticipating, with downgrades to the growth outlook for almost all of the world's major economies and almost all of our major trading partners. The OECD analysis has wiped 0.6 percentage points off the global growth projection for 2023, is predicting no growth at all for the UK next year, negligible growth in the United States, slower growth in China than previously predicted. And these factors are contributing to this are growing inflationary pressures, increasing energy security shocks, the continued illegal war advanced by Russia against Ukraine, and extreme uncertainty over the future. This analysis from the OECD is confronting reading, but I want to assure Australians that we are working all day and every day to put the Australian economy in the best position it can be placed in to tackle these global challenges head-on. In a few weeks, the Treasurer, Dr Chalmers, will be going to Washington for a short trip to meet with our international counterparts about some of the current challenges, to discuss some of these difficult issues and challenges that lie ahead, not just here in Australia but globally. The reality is, certainly from my point of view, that the budget could have been in better and stronger position if it wasn't for the years of mismanagement from those opposite. And we are doing what we can to put that budget back on track, but there's no doubt that there are some difficult days ahead which will require a lot of work and cooperation and collaboration with our international counterparts. But I can assure Australians that the Treasurer and I and our colleagues are working day and night to make sure that the budget we put together in October assists with meeting some of these challenges.
Thank you, Senator Gallagher. Senator Pratt, first supplementary.
Can the Minister outline how the Australian economy is placed to deal with some of these global challenges?
Thank you. Minister.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Pratt for the supplementary. Here in Australia, we do have some advantages that will position the economy well to withstand the worst of these challenges. But as the OECD report identifies, some of these are intensifying and not disappearing, and the Australian economy will not be immune from these impacts. We are a government that from day one have been upfront with Australians about the situation now, and that we forecast to be the challenges that we collectively face in the future. This is a stark difference to the kind of government we saw when those opposite were in office. As I said, this is not aided by the state of the books we inherited, which isn't in good shape, and we are making some. Well, I'm happy to debate that with you too, Senator Henderson, if you want to bring that on. But we enter this period of uncertainty after a wasted decade, the consequences of which can be seen in wages growth, flatlining productivity and $1 trillion of debt.
Senator Pratt, second supplementary.
Can the minister outline why the Albanese Labor government is best placed to guide the Australian economy through these challenging times?
Thank you, Senator. Minister.
Thank you, President. I can. It is critical for Australia's economy that we deal with some of the challenges, like we have been doing with climate after 10 years of wasted years on energy policy. 22 failed policies and not one of them landed. Looking at policies like cheaper childcare, investing in TAFE, cleaner and cheaper energy, skills reform and a future made in Australia. We need to make sure that we are dealing with the waste and rorts that was defined the period of the previous government, but this is just the beginning, not the end of our work. Our work will last beyond this budget and into the next. It will take multiple budgets to fix the mess we got left, and it will involve some hard choices. But despite everything that's been thrown at us, Australians have every reason to be optimistic about the long-term prospects of our economy and our country, and certainly the budget that we are putting together right now.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Cash.
My question is to the Minister for Finance, Senator Gallagher. Will the minister rule out tax increases or new taxes on Australians in the coming budget?
Thank you, Senator. Minister.
After Johnny.
Order. 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 The minister is on her feet waiting to answer the question, and there needs to be silence. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, and I welcome the opportunity to talk about the Albanese government's plan to fix the budget and to deliver on our promises. We have made it clear that, and we made it clear during the election campaign, that our focus would be on multinational tax reform. We outlined that in our plan for a better budget. We were clear about that in terms of the revenue that it would return. We were also clear about the savings that we would seek to put in place to fix the budget that you broke. That is clear in our, what would we call it, better budget, better economy, Labor's plan for a better future. This is the plan that got endorsed.
Senator Gallagher. Senator Henderson.
Madam President, thank you. On a point of order, I'd ask that the minister direct her comments through the chair. Thank you.
There was so much disorder then. I think the minister was, apart from one interjection, but I will remind senators once again that interjections are disorderly and that comments need to be directed to the chair. Please continue, Minister.
Thank you. I was just getting started. Thank you, President. But we will not be lectured. We will not be lectured by when in government. When you lot were in government, you were the highest taxing, highest spending government in history. And here you go, trying to lecture us about it. We've been clear about what our plan is. Our focus is on multinational tax reform. You could also support our approach to reduce taxes on electric vehicles.
Minister,
we actually want to lower taxes.
Minister, please resume your seat. Senator Birmingham.
President, point of order on relevance. Senator Cash's question was very clear, asking about tax increases or new taxes on Australians. It wasn't about multinationals. It was about on Australians.
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. I would ask senators, when they call points of order, to please be brief. Order. I'll call the minister. I do believe she's being relevant. Please continue, Minister.
Thank you. And the point I was making, and I have made, is that our focus will be on multinational tax reform. Our focus in the budget will be implementing the commitments we took that formed part of Labor's plan for a better future. We won't be lectured by those about taxes. Well, how about you support?
Order.
Our proposal to lower taxes? How about that? We thought you liked lower taxes.
Order.
Lower taxes on electric vehicles. How about that? How about you support that? We're trying to lower taxes.
Order.
That's a priority.
Minister.
And you guys won't have a bar of it. You want to keep them high.
Minister, please resume your seat. Senator Henderson.
I regret to have to raise this point of order again. Just a reminder to direct her comments through the chair, please.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Senator Henderson. I will remind those, particularly on my left, that interjections are disorderly. There are a lot of interjections coming from the left. So I remind all senators that those are disorderly, and I'll remind the minister that her comments need to be directed to the chair. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, President. And of course I will follow that ruling. We won't be lectured by those opposite about taxing when their record on taxing was the highest taxing government. We are doing the responsible thing. We'll be implementing the commitments we took to the election.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Cash, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Can the minister guarantee to the Senate that there will be no changes to franking credits in the upcoming budget, as Labor promised at the last election?
Thank you, Senator Cash. Minister.
This budget will be our opportunity to implement the commitments we took to the election.
Order.
Which we took to the election. As I've been clear, we are implementing the policies that we took. Remember those? We've got them. We've got the policies. We will be implement. The October budget is partly to implement our election commitments, and the other part of the October budget, through you, President, is to deal with the waste and rorts that you guys buried in the budget as a payoff to
Minister,
colleagues when you were used.
Please resume your seat. Sorry, Senator Cash, I'm waiting for silence. Senator
President,
Cash.
a point of order in relation to relevance. The question actually was incredibly specific. It referred to ruling out changes to franking credits. I would ask you that you direct the minister to be relevant to the question.
Thank you, Senator Cash. It also included the word budget, but the I can't direct the minister to answer your question. I can order. Order. I can direct the minister where she's not being relevant to be relevant. I'll ask her to continue. Please continue, Minister.
I think I've answered the question. The budget, which I was asked about, you are right, President, I was asked about what will be in the budget. It will be a combination of policies we took to the election and the first stage of the waste and rorts work that I've been doing, cleaning up the mess, the billions of dollars in the budget that you buried for political convenience. That's what this budget will be about.
Senator Cash, second supplementary.
President, can the minister advise whether Australian families will receive the promised $275 energy bill relief in the upcoming budget?
Thank you, Senator Cash. Minister.
Well, then, honestly, the audacious. You continue to surprise me, Senator Cash. Honestly, after 10 years, 22 failed energy policies, a 20% increase in electricity prices on your watch that you buried before the election, that you would stand up and ask us about energy prices.
Resume your seat. Senator Wong. Order. 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 Senator McGrath and Senator Wong. Senator Wong. Order. I have a senator on her feet seeking to make a point of order, and it was so disorderly that Senator Cash had to sit down again. I would ask senators to listen Quietly, Senator Cash.
Thank you, President. A point of order in relation to relevance. The question was actually about the government, not the opposition, and whether or not Australian families will receive the promised $275.
And
I would ask you to direct the Minister to the question.
I will direct the Minister to your question. Minister.
Thank you. It's just the audaciousness of it is stunning. It's just staggering. It's absolutely staggering. As though you're these passive players in the decade of energy failure. Honestly.
Minister Wong. Senator Wong. Senator Cash, order. 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 Senator Wong. Senator Wong. Senator Wong. Minister, please continue. Minister, have you concluded your answer? You did have 5 seconds. Okay, thank you. Senator Cox. Thank you, Senator Sterle. Senator Cox.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Climate Change, Minister Wong. Given last week's announcement regarding the landmark case against the Australian government lodged to the UN Human Rights Committee by the people of the Torres Strait Islands in May 2021, it clearly stated the federal government breached their fundamental rights to culture and life. What will the new Labor government do to ensure they uphold Indigenous rights as part of their climate policy and planning, in particular Article 27, the right to culture, and Article 17, the right to be free from arbitrary interference with privacy, family and home?
Thank you, Senator Cox. Minister.
Thank you to Senator Cox for the question, and she's correct that the UN Human Rights Committee found on Friday the 23rd of 23rd of September that Australia had violated the rights of a group of Torres Strait Islanders by failing to adequately protect them from the impacts of climate change. And the finding was made in response to a 2019 complaint filed by 8 Torres Strait Islanders from small, low-lying islands in the Strait. This is a reminder, if I may say before I try to respond to the second part of the question, of what the Labor Party has been saying for years, which is that climate change was an existing threat to island nations and island homes, both in the Pacific region, but also in the Torres Strait. And I can recall going to, I think it was to Saibai Island when I was Climate Minister, and seeing firsthand, and this is in 2008 or 9, what was already occurring as a result of increased storm surge and how that was eroding coastline and eroding infrastructure. And it is a reminder yet again of the irresponsibility of those opposite who for 9 years refused to do anything about this. In relation to the broader issue, which is how you try to give effect to and keep faith with First Nations peoples, we have a long way to go on this, Senator. I acknowledge that, and part of what we are trying to do with our First Nations ambassador and First Nations foreign policy initiatives is to work through how it is that you bring the perspective of First Nations peoples into the work we do in the world, including on climate. And I was very grateful to have Senator Dodson accompany me to the UN General Assembly for that reason.
Thank you, Minister. Your time has expired. Senator Cox, first supplementary.
Australia can no longer hide behind the fact that, or the myth, in fact, that Scope 3 emissions are not their responsibility and they are free of legal obligation after this landmark case. What are the decisive steps this government are taking to drastically cut emissions and invest in adaptation measures in the Torres Strait Islands and other First Nations communities vulnerable to climate change?
Minister.
Thank you. In relation to the first part, we're not hiding behind anything. That is the framework the United Nations has agreed, Senator. So let's be clear about that. That is that we are adhering to a framework that the world community has agreed, and we will take decisive steps, as we are taking for the first time in a decade, to reduce emissions. And under our policy, in excess of 80% of Australia's energy, despite the fact we have vast fossil fuel resources, the overwhelming majority of our energy under our plan this decade will be renewable, and that is a substantial step. In relation, and because I'm tired, I forgot the second part of your question. But in relation to the broader issue of adaptation, I would make the point we are clear about the need to try and help and work with Torres Strait Island communities.
Thank you, Senator Wong. Your time has expired. Senator Cox, second supplementary.
Minister, when will this government start listening to the voices of First Nations people in Australia, led by our Torres Strait Islander brothers, sisters and their children, who echo their neighbouring Indigenous nations of the Asia-Pacific, and globally to say no to new coal and gas projects on their ancestral lands that breach their human rights, fast-tracking the destruction of our culture, climate and risking their livelihoods?
Thank you, Senator Cox. Minister.
Well, first, in relation to the voice of First Nations communities, Australia's regime, environmental assessment regime, and should ensure that those voices are heard. And I think you have seen from senators in this place on this side, and I would hope for some from the other side, a recognition that that is an important part of ensuring approvals meet the community test, the social licence test. In relation to who we are listening to, I would make the point to you, Senator, that the Torres Strait has seen the Prime Minister, the Minister for Indigenous Affairs and the Climate Minister all visiting in the first months of government to hear firsthand from First Nations people in the Torres Strait about their experience, what they need and how we can help. We intend to engage in good faith with them and with the views of the Human Rights Committee.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Ciccone.
Thank you very much, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Home Affairs, Senator Watt. The cyber attack on Optus and the theft of personally identifiable customer data is of great concern. Can the Minister please update the Senate on the breach and the possible impact on Australians?
Thank you, Senator. Minister.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Ciccone. You're right, this is a matter of great concern to all Australians. Australians expect, when they hand over their personal data, that every effort will be made to keep it safe from harm. We know that billions of Australians have been impacted by the Optus data breach. This data breach, let's be clear, should not have happened. It involved the release of Australian citizens' names, date of birth, phone numbers, email addresses, residential addresses and, for some customers, passport and driver's licence numbers being for sale on the dark web. Completely unacceptable. We are incredibly concerned as a government this morning about further reports that personal information from the Optus data breach also includes Medicare numbers. Medicare numbers were never advised to have formed part of compromised information from this data breach. Optus has a clear obligation to notify affected individuals and the Australian Information Commissioner when a data breach involving personal information is likely to result in serious harm. Consumers also have a right to know exactly what individual personal information has been compromised in Optus's communications to them. Yesterday, the Minister for Home Affairs called on Optus to provide more support to impacted customers, and I was pleased that Optus made a commitment to provide free credit monitoring to impacted consumers. This will help protect consumers against identity theft as a result of this breach, and I know all of my government colleagues are of the same view. The government expects Optus to continue to work with customers to help them understand the impact on them and what Optus can do to help. Optus owes the Australian public a full explanation and nothing less.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Ciccone, first supplementary.
Thank you, and thank you for that response, Minister. Can you please outline the steps that the Australian government is taking in response to the data breach?
Minister.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Ciccone. As the Minister for Home Affairs said yesterday, and I repeated in this chamber yesterday, very substantial support has been provided by the Australian government since this data breach was revealed, and I want to credit the work of the Australian Signals Directorate, the Australian Cyber Security Centre and the Australian Federal Police for their support. The Attorney-General has also announced today that the Federal Bureau of Investigation is also assisting the AFP with this investigation, which shows the reach of this data breach. The Privacy Commissioner is currently working with Optus to obtain further information to determine whether she will conduct a formal investigation. While we will, of course, not go into the technical assistance and cyber security advice that is being provided to Optus, we want to reassure Australians that the full weight of cybersecurity capabilities across government, including the Australian Signals Directorate, the Australian Cybersecurity Centre and the Australian Federal Police, are working around the clock, along with ministers, to respond to this breach.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Ciccone, second supplementary.
And I thank again the Minister for that answer. Could the Minister please outline how this government's approach to cybersecurity contrasts with the previous administration?
Senator Watt.
Thank you, Senator Ciccone. And this is a very important point that I know Senator Wong was going to in her answer to Senator Patterson's questions as well. I've here outlined the approach that this government has taken in the short time that we've been in office in response to cybersecurity in general and in response to this particular data breach. And the contrast with the inaction and sloth that we saw from the then government for 10 years could not be greater. Just to give you one example, in March 2019, over 3 years ago, the then Attorney-General, Mr Porter, stated that existing protections and penalties for misuse of Australians' personal information fall short of community expectations 3 years ago. He followed it up by finally introducing legislation in June 2019, saying again that penalties needed to be increased for data privacy breaches. That legislation then sat around doing nothing for 3 years. Further legislation was introduced just before the election and nothing happened. Now, I noticed Mr Tan this morning saying this government was asleep, the former government was asleep at the wheel. Here is yet another example of doing so.
Your time has expired. Senator David Pocock.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Social Services, Senator Farrell. ACOS has today launched a new report, How JobSeeker and other income support payments have fallen behind the cost of living. We already know Australians are suffering the worst cost of living crisis in generations. The report reveals just how bad this is. 62% of low-income earners are eating less or skipping meals. 71% are cutting back on meat, fresh fruit and vegetables. Almost half of low-income earners spend half their income on rent. 71% of low-income earners have been cutting back on heating over winter. When will the government raise the rate above $48 per day and lift millions of Australians out of poverty?
Thank you, Senator. Senator Farrell.
Thank you, President, and I thank Senator Pocock for that very important question. The issue is one that the current government takes very seriously and appreciates the sentiment in which you've raised this and the sincerity with which you have raised the issue. I'll make a couple of observations about the process. Of course, there will be an indexation process in the October budget, and we know from statements already made by the Prime Minister that he is obviously concerned about the issue, concerned about the people who find themselves in this situation, and he has undertaken to look closely at the issue and to see what can be done in what is a very difficult budget circumstances. We were left with $1 trillion worth of debt, as has been said already. The highest taxing and highest spending government in history, the previous government. That's left us with an extremely difficult set of financial circumstances to deal with. But the Prime Minister understands the issues that people in these circumstances find themselves, and he has undertaken that he will look at the issue and look at the issue.
Thank you, Minister. Your time has expired. Sorry. Senator Pocock, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Senator Farrell. Outside of indexation, will the rate be raised in the September budget?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister.
Thank you, Senator Pocock, and again thank you for your question and your concern in this space. I'd make this observation that it's not customary for ministers, particularly ministers like myself, to reveal what may or may not be in the budget. That's for the Treasurer to deal with, and he will deal with that in due course. And we don't have very long to wait to find out what will be in what will be the first Albanese budget. However, I can say this, that 5 million people on.
Thank you, Minister. Your time has expired. Senator Pocock, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. We hear much from the government about tough challenges and tough choices that the government face. This is about choices. What do you say to Canberrans like Sam and Leilani who are here today about whether they should choose between housing or heating? What do you say to them when you're subsidising a fossil fuel industry that's making record profits to the tune of billions of dollars of taxpayer money?
Thank you, Senator. Minister.
Well, I say welcome to the Senate to them. If they'd like to identify themselves, I'll give them a little wave. There we are. There they are. Look.
Order. Order.
I've answered all of the questions as honestly as I can. I wish with a wave of a wand we could solve every difficult financial issue that we. I wish with the wave of a wand we could solve every difficult financial issue that we were left by this incompetent coalition government over the last 9 years. But we're not going to be able to do that. But we understand the issues, and I can only repeat what the Prime Minister has already said, that it's his intention to look at this issue from now on in respect of every budget.
Thank you, Minister. Your time has expired. Senator Cadell.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Health, Senator Gallagher. Minister, on 29 July, the Minister for Health said, "It's never been harder or more expensive to see a doctor in Australia." And just yesterday described the GP shortage as terrifying and something he is deeply concerned by. Given the Health Minister clearly recognises the pressures of the health system is under, can the Minister guarantee the government will not cut the $27.5 million in regional development funding for the Coffs Harbour Health Services Precinct delivered in the 2022 federal budget?
Thank you, Senator Cadell. Minister.
Thank you. And I won't stand here and foreshadow decisions that are being considered through the budget process. I have been clear with the chamber, and I think publicly, that we are reviewing measures from the March 22-23 budget. Sorry, March. The March election, the budget before the election. We are reviewing that. There was a lot of spending in that.
Order.
But if that spending
Senator
is warranted,
Ruston,
if it's needed, if it meets that test, then we will make decisions based on that. Like, seriously, we need to go through an incoming government to have a look at where this money was placed. And we've seen reports in the paper today about some of the decisions made under some of these programs where proponents weren't aware of it, where applications weren't made for it, when disproportionate amounts went to particular parts of the country. So there is a legitimate issue here that we are taking our time to work through. On the issue of health, and making sure that the health system is adequately resourced, we have already injected, I think, over $1.4 billion into the health system through various payments and COVID-related things. I'll check that figure if I've got it wrong, but we have made those investments. These were money that wasn't provisioned for by the previous government. We have made additional investments into health. On the issue of the GP shortage, that it is a crisis. Primary care is in crisis, and 9 years of cuts to Medicare and pushing back and not ensuring that there was a good supply of doctors coming in and being trained into general practice is a problem that we inherited from those opposite that we are trying to fix. And people can be guaranteed that the Labor government will always be better on hospitals and always better on Medicare.
Thank you, Minister. Your time has expired. Order. Senator Cadell, first supplementary.
Can the minister also guarantee the government will not be cutting the $19.5 million in regional development funding for the Shepparton Rural Clinic Health School delivered in the 2022 federal budget?
Thank you, Senator. Minister.
Thank you. Well, as I said, my answer is the same. We are going through all of the measures. If they stack up, if they actually meet that quality test of yes, they're needed, yes, they can be delivered, yes, they've been properly costed, we will proceed with many of the measures where they meet that test. If they don't meet that test, then we are looking at other opportunities to reprioritise, to return money to the budget. Can I just remind people, the budget we inherited had deficits in the order of over $200 billion. $200 billion across the forward estimates, $1 trillion in debt. We have debt, cost of servicing debt are going to exceed many government programs in the next few years. Just the increase in interest is going to hit the budget to $125 billion. This is the budget that we're trying to manage, and we will prioritise accordingly.
Thank you, Minister. Your time has expired. Senator Cadell, second supplementary.
Can the minister guarantee the government will not cut the $8.3 million regional development funding for a national post-traumatic stress disorder centre at the University of the Sunshine Coast delivered in the 2022 federal budget?
Thank you, Senator. Minister.
Well, we're working through all of that. As I've said, my answer is the same to the two previous questions. But I would also say that we are this is serious. We are also working through all of the health programs that are ongoing programs, like adult dental, for example, that just falls off a cliff next year. Yeah. They're the problems that we've inherited. What about the My Health record card? Also, we'll just get rid of that, shall we, in the next 2 years? We have so many terminating programs in health, over 200 terminating programs that we are dealing with, that you hid. So you tried to make your presentation of your budget look better by cutting services and not funding them properly, by not funding them in an ongoing. So is adult dental going to need to be funded after next year? Yeah, I reckon there's a pretty high chance it needs to be.
McKenzie.
But yet those opposite didn't make provision for it in the budget, and this is what we are fixing.
Senator Lambie.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is for the Minister for Finance, Minister Gallagher.
Order. Senator Lambie, please resume your seat. We've moved on now to Senator Lambie's question. She has the right to ask it in silence without the constant interjections across the chamber. They are disorderly. Senator Lambie.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is for the Minister for Finance, Minister Gallagher. The MOPS Act review is due to be completed by the end of this week. Will the government immediately release the review when it is provided to the Prime Minister? If it doesn't intend to release it there and then, how long will it take until you will release that review?
Thank you, Senator Lambie. Minister Gallagher.
Sorry, I just didn't catch the end of your question, but and I thank Senator Lambie for the question. I think it was around release of the MOPS review. I think the intention is to release that review after it's been provided and people have had opportunity to be briefed on it. The intention is to release that review publicly.
Senator Lambie, first supplementary.
Standard convention is that opposition staffing is set as a proportion of the staffing allocation afforded to the sitting government. What's the convention for the crossbench?
Minister.
My understanding is that the allocation of personal staff to officers of, cross-ministerial officers, opposition officers and crossbench is at the complete discretion of the Prime Minister. That is a decision that falls entirely within his portfolio, and he's made those decisions based on information and advice he's had.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Lambie, second supplementary.
Since the Prime Minister has never been come from a crossbench, why should the leader of a political party have the power to set the resources available to his political opponents?
Thank you, Senator Lambie. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. This is the arrangement that has existed for some time, is my understanding, that staffing levels in this building and how many advisors that people are entitled to have is at the discretion of the Prime Minister. I think, certainly from the discussions that I've had with him, that he felt that additional staff over and above EO staff should be provided to members of the crossbench where they had additional responsibilities, and that's what he's done. So everyone gets the 4 electorate office staff, and where there's additional responsibilities, and I think in the Senate people have been provided with 2 additional staff. On top of that, that means as personal staff, crossbench have 6 staff available to them, and that we use electorate office staff as members in this place do all the time. In fact, I'm using EO staff in my office when required as well to support parliamentary responsibilities.
Senator Sterle.
Thanks, President. My question is to the Minister for Trade and Tourism, Senator Farrell. The tourism and travel industry have had a few challenging years. Given today is World Tourism Day, can the Minister please provide an update on how the industry is faring?
Thank you, Senator. Minister.
Thank you, President, and I thank Senator Sterle for his excellent question on World Tourism Day. And it is, in fact, World Tourism Day today, and I'd like to say thank you to the dedicated people who work in our tourism and travel industry. Without you, we wouldn't have such a robust and vibrant tourism industry. The survival of tourism businesses and the growth that we've seen in the domestic tourism market is a testament to the hard work and dedication of those people who work in this industry. It has been a very tough few years for many travel and tourism businesses. Managing through the pandemic was no small feat. But Australians are back out enjoying some of our iconic regions, ticking things off their bucket list and supporting local travel and tourism businesses. Tourism Research Australia's data shows that domestic tourism is actually booming. Many regions have surpassed where they were pre-pandemic, and others are close to pre-pandemic levels. The previous government had all of the wrong priorities. They had to be dragged kicking and screaming to introducing JobKeeper, and then they moved it from tourism businesses far too early, knowing that many were still struggling immensely. The growth seen in our domestic industry is a testament to the hard work of those who work in the visitor economy and their determination to keep the doors open and the tours operating. And again, I say thank you to every single person who works in our tourism and travel sector.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Sterle, first supplementary.
Yes, thank you, President. Minister, what is the Albanese government doing to support tourism and travel industry to recover post-pandemic?
Minister.
Thank you, President, and I thank once again Senator Sterle for his very important question. This government, unlike the previous government, understands the importance of the travel and tourism industry, and that's why we've decided that in the upcoming budget we're going to invest in the recovery of this sector. Pre-COVID, the visitor economy was worth about $166 billion annually, and it was growing faster than GDP and supported 1 in 12 Australians in work. Our $48 million tourism package aims to attract and train workers, upgrade caravan and camping infrastructure, increase the focus on business events.
Thank you, Minister. Your time has expired. Senator Sterle, second supplementary.
Yes, President, thank you. So what are some of the outcomes, Minister, are you hoping to come from the Tourism Ministers' meeting?
Thank you, Senator. Minister.
Thank you, President. And that's an excellent question, Senator Sterle. Pre-pandemic, tourism employed almost 1 million Australians across every state and territory, and it's a truly national industry in which every jurisdiction has an interest in maintaining and growing, which is why I'm looking forward to meeting with my fellow tourism ministers at the upcoming ministerial meeting in Adelaide next week. We'll be discussing ways that all governments can work together to support our tourism industry in all of the regions. There will be a focus on addressing the workforce and skill shortages, as well as issues facing aviation in our country. These are some of the largest problems facing the sector, and unfortunately no region has been immune. They're not new issues, just ones that the last government
Thank
simply—
you, Minister. Your time has expired. Senator Dean Smith.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Senator Farrell, for that. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. The ACCC states that because of the temporary cut in the fuel excise in the period 29th of March to the 10th of May 2022, the largest decrease seen in average daily regular unleaded petrol prices was more than 39 cents per litre in all 5 largest cities, being Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Adelaide and Perth, and between 25 and 48 cents per litre in Canberra, Hobart and Darwin. Does the minister agree?
Thank you, Senator Smith. Minister.
Sorry, what do I agree with? The facts that you just put about the ACCC. Sorry, I'm seeking clarification. Yeah.
If you'd like to reread the question.
My question is to the
Senator
Minister
Smith.
representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. The ACCC states that because of the temporary cut in the fuel excise in the period 29th of March to 10th of May 2022, the largest decrease seen in average daily regular unleaded petrol prices was more than 39 cents per litre in all 5 largest cities, being Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Adelaide and Perth, and between 25 and 48 cents per litre in Canberra, Hobart and Darwin. Does the minister agree?
Thank you, Senator Smith. Minister.
Thank you. Well, I've got no reason to disagree with the ACCC.
Order.
I have no reason to. The information I have before me aligns largely with that, which is, I think, taken from a different data source. But yes, in the larger markets, falls in the order of anywhere from 26% in Sydney to, I think, the biggest in Perth and Darwin, which were higher than that. So yes, I have no reason to disagree that because of the fuel excise temporary measure, that we did see a fall from the peaks that were experienced in March.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Smith, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Can the minister advise the Senate on the average monthly benefit to motorists living in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Adelaide and Perth of the decision to provide temporary fuel excise relief?
Thank you, Senator Smith. Minister.
I don't have that information. I'll see if I can make it available, but it would vary obviously across households considerably, depending on the number of cars, the distance that you travel for work, people obviously living in the suburbs and commuting to the city versus those that were in the city. I mean, it's a whole range of different factors there, but I don't think any of us are disputing the fact that the excise, which cost $2.9 billion for 6 months, reduced the price of petrol at the Bowser. That was the intention of that policy. It was when petrol prices were considerably higher than they are right now. Your party, when in government, set the timetable for that to come off at the end of September. Our decision is aligned with the timetable that you, when you were in government, set. It was set as a temporary measure, and as people would know, I'll have the opportunity to talk further.
Senator Smith, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. The Treasurer, Mr. Chalmers, has said industry estimates that there will be more than 700 million litres of lower excise fuel in the system when the fuel excise is reintroduced. And so the ACCC and the government expect that the price of petrol shouldn't shoot up at the Bowser on Wednesday night by the full 23 cents if the normal market pressures are in operation." End quote. Given the Treasurer's comments, can the minister confirm the date on which Australian motorists can expect to be paying?
Well, it'll be the date when those 700. Sorry, that I can't remember the exact figure. It was the exact figure that you quoted, 700 million litres, when that expires. I mean, that's the point we're trying to make, that we would not expect, and we will look very firmly down on any petrol station that has supplies purchased under the previous arrangement that sees the need to overnight jack the price up 23 cents a litre. We want to make sure that people get the right deal to the maximum possible benefit from the fuel that was purchased under the arrangements where the temporary measure was in place. I think that's entirely reasonable. I hope you would agree with that. And I think petrol stations will do the right thing, and we want to make sure the Australian people knew about that, which is why we made those comments last week, and it's why the ACCC will be watching this as the temporary measure comes off. But we would like to see people do the right thing. It's a generous measure that's been put in place,
Minister.
but it's
Your
only
time
temporary.
has expired. Senator Green.
My question is to the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Senator Wong. Can the minister report to the Senate on her visit to the United Nations General Assembly and on her message to other countries on the need to protect and promote the international rules-based order?
Thank you, Senator. Minister.
Can I thank Senator Green for her question and for her interest in international affairs, and thank you on indulgence. Also thank my colleagues, particularly Senators Farrell and Gallagher, for covering me in my absence yesterday. President, Australia helped create the United Nations after World War II, and we did that because it was in our interest to have a world in which countries operate by agreed rules and norms, and where outcomes are not determined by power and size alone. In fact, if you look at what is occurring in Ukraine, it is a reminder of how much all of us have to lose if we fail to protect the United Nations Charter. Australia and every other country in the world cannot accept a situation where large countries simply can determine the fate of smaller countries. We don't want to see any one country dominating or any country being dominated. So for this reason, Russia's attack on Ukraine is an attack on all smaller countries, and this was a message in meetings around the UN General Assembly week and in the national statement that I articulated on behalf of Australia. It is a position which aligns us with nations around the world, particularly those small and medium-sized nations. I had the privilege of delivering a national statement to the General Assembly on behalf of Australia. In that, I made the point that we are more than just supporting players in a drama of global geopolitics. We can't leave it to the big powers to work it out, and we can't be passive when big powers flout the rules. That is Australia's historical legacy at the United Nations. It is a legacy that the Albanese government seeks to renew. We all want a world that is stable, that is peaceful, that is prosperous and that is respectful of sovereignty. And it is up to all of us to create that world. And in Australia's own region, we have to ensure also that competition does not escalate into conflict, and it is up to all of us to consider how it is we can avert such catastrophic.
Senator Green, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Can the minister outline how she used her time in New York to advance the national interest?
Thank you, Senator. Minister Wong.
Thank you, Senator Green. I had the opportunity in New York to attend around 60 engagements, which included bilateral and trilateral meetings, pull-asides and larger meetings where I could represent Australia's views. Bilateral meetings obviously reflected our key national priorities. It was an opportunity to meet with counterparts from countries that I've not had a chance to visit, as well as to re-engage with those nations, representatives from nations which I have had the opportunity to visit. Those direct meetings included Indonesia, India, Timor-Leste, Ukraine, Solomon Islands, Kiribati, China, Jordan, the United Kingdom, the Netherlands and others, and were often focused on the threats to the rules-based order and what we could collectively do to protect it. There was also a major focus of a meeting with Quad foreign ministers I chaired a meeting of the Friends of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, which convened by the Prime Minister of Japan.
Thank you, Minister. Your time has expired. Senator Green, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. And of particular interest to my part of the world, Minister, how did the Albanese Labor government use participation at the General Assembly to promote the concerns of our Pacific family?
Minister.
At the United Nations, we worked to ensure that we engaged deeply with Pacific partners and responded to their needs. This included working with Pacific Island Forum members to launch the 2050 strategy for the Blue Pacific, which I had the privilege of hosting. Well, Prime Minister Bainimarama hosted at the Australian mission, and we were very privileged to support that. In addition, I joined the United Nations General Assembly Ocean Panel leaders on ensuring the health and resilience of our oceans, which we know is vital to our Pacific family. Unlike those opposite, we know we are stronger in the world when we work together to defend our interests, and we seek to treat our friends and partners with respect and listen to what they say. And instead of disrespecting our Pacific family's climate concerns, we are seeking to work with them to deliver real action on climate and to build a stronger Pacific family, and I thank them for their engagement.
Thank you, Minister.
And
Your
with
time
that,
has expired.
President, I ask that further questions be placed on notice.
Senator Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I just have a matter relating to question time yesterday.
Yep.
In question time on the 26th of September, I took questions from Senator McKenzie in my capacity as the Minister representing the Treasurer relating to the full fuel tax credit scheme. I've written to Senator McKenzie to provide additional information, and I table the letter for the information of senators.
Thank you. Senator Faruqi.
I seek leave to move that general business, notice of motion number 43, be called on immediately and have precedence over all other business until determined.
Is leave granted? Leave is granted. Senator Faruqi.
Thank you, President. Like many migrants and people of colour in this country, I've been told to go back to where I come from hundreds of times. Senator Pauline Hanson did it a few days ago, telling me in a tweet to piss off back to Pakistan. It was a racist slur against me and for her supporters, a deliberate and effective attempt to whip up a frenzy and mobilize a pile-on. And right on cue, her tweet triggered an avalanche of and days of abusive calls, emails, tweets, and comments directed at me, saying things like, "People will piss on your grave," "I will cheer when you die," "Your lot are good for target practice," "What a dirty, vulgar creature you are," "You are lower than pond life," and predictably, this is exactly what I'm talking about, President. This is the sort of behaviour.
Senator
This
Faruqi,
is the sort of
Senator
behaviour,
Faruqi,
President.
Senator Faruqi, please. Order. Order. This is a particularly serious matter. Senator Canavan, I've called the Senate to order. And I am asking senators on this occasion to listen respectfully. And if you wish to make a point, stand and make that point respectfully. Do not call out across the chamber. It is disrespectful and it is disorderly. I expect Senator Faruqi and any other senator who participates in this debate, whether you agree with their opinion or not, to be heard in silence. Senator Faruqi.
Thank you, President. Predictably, dozens of versions of "shut the F up and leave" were also there. While I bore the brunt of it, my family—
Senator Faruqi, please resume your seat. Senator Watt.
I don't mean to interrupt the debate, but Senator Canavan is obviously ignoring your request. This is a sensitive matter. Discussions have occurred to keep this debate respectful, and I'd ask that all senators, regardless of their opinions, follow that so that we can have a debate on a sensitive matter in a respectful manner. That applies across the chamber.
Thank you, Senator Watt. I do not expect— Order! I do not expect repeated points of order to be called during this debate. I expect senators to be respectful, and that is to remain silent. You are free to stand and seek the call and make a point. I would ask you to respond in that way. Please continue, Senator Faruqi.
Thank you, President. While I bore the brunt of it, my family and staff were also subjected to unacceptable vitriol. Someone even called my husband's workplace and told him to go back to where he came from because people are effing sick of us. Many migrants let me know how triggered they felt after reading Senator Hanson's attack tweet. It never gets easier to deal with racist attacks. It hurts every time. It does shake your sense of worth and your belonging to a place which has been home to me for 30 years. It is insulting and it is humiliating. But then that's exactly what it is intending to do. Racism takes an immense toll on our mental and physical health. It is an experience that is hard to explain, of being despised, not just for what I look like and where I came from, but also for having the audacity to participate in public debate. It is even more painful because so often we are told to just get on with it. We are gaslighted by those who have never experienced racism into downplaying our own trauma. We are also gaslighted by those who think engaging in racist attacks constitutes fair debate, even though the line between genuine, robust debate and racism and discrimination should actually be clear to everyone. Senator Hanson crossed that line, as she has done so many other times. While others take for granted the right to voice their opinion, for migrants of colour, our Australianness will always be conditional. It is conditional on us keeping our heads down and our mouths shut. It is conditional on us being grateful for being let in. It is conditional on us giving up our identity and assimilating. It is conditional on us agreeing to those in power, even if it means ignoring our own trauma. Well, to hell with that. Let me say this loudly and clearly to Senator Hanson and to each and every person who joined in the pylon, including Senator Lambie. I and everyone like me, us black and brown people, have every right to participate in public debate, just like white people. Yet you hate us for having the temerity to raise our heads above the parapet, to join the public debate on what you see as controversial topics. I'm here, in here, you try to silence people who hold racism to account instead of the perpetrators of racism. Targets of racism risk being labelled unparliamentary for pointing out blatant racism when it happens, while the racists sit back and relax, protected from the repercussions of outdated, unfit-for-purpose conventions and rules. Well, you will not silence us. I will not be silenced, especially on the topic of the British monarch and monarchy, the head of an empire which ruthlessly colonized, plundered, looted, and divided the land of my ancestors. Truth about the empire must be told. I will not toe the line and participate in a willful delusion about the monarchy, which exists to maintain white supremacy and to make all the beneficiaries of colonialism feel comfortable at the expense of its targets. Over centuries of rule over most of the Indian subcontinent, where I came from, first through the violent and rapacious East India Company, and then through the Crown itself, the British monarchy decimated the economy and caused the deaths of millions. They destroyed thriving local industries like textiles and shipbuilding through violence, through taxes, through import tariffs. They taxed locals at exorbitant, unprecedented rates, and through torture and cruelty stole vast wealth which they shipped off to England. Reparations have never been paid by the empire for its barbarism, and much of the loot is still shamelessly held, including in the form of diamonds in the Queen's crowns or treasures in British museums. And of course, this nation has experienced and continues to experience British colonialism in its bloodiest form. My solidarity with the First Nations people who never ceded their sovereignty of these lands and who continue to bravely speak the truth of empire often at much personal cost. I have the right to talk about this history without being racially vilified. Senator Hanson's catalogue of racist filth over the past decades is widely known and truly despicable, and yet she has rarely been held to account, if at all. She has never been held to account for all the harm that she has caused. She has never been suspended, fined, stripped of her privileges, or even just made to apologize. She faced no real consequences in 1996 when she said this country was in danger of being swamped by Asians. And then again in 2016 when she claimed that we were now in danger of being swamped by Muslims. She faced no real accountability in 2006 when she claimed Africans coming to Australia had AIDS and were of no benefit to this country. She faced no real sanction in 2017 when she called Islam a disease against which we need to vaccinate ourselves. She faced no real sanction in 2017 when she mockingly wore a burqa into this chamber. But you know what? It's never too late. We can start today. I do urge senators to hold your colleagues accountable for unacceptable behavior and the racial vilification of one of your peers. If you don't, then all your commitments to setting the standard in this place will be nothing but empty rhetoric. The standard you walk past is the standard you accept, and thus far, our Parliament has accepted this hateful racism of the worst standard. It is no surprise, therefore, that the Jenkins Review found workers in Parliament felt that they wouldn't be taken seriously in raising issues of racism. It's no surprise that First Nations people and people of colour don't see Parliament as a safe workplace for them. It is so important that we recognise that no decent workplace would tolerate the dangerous, unhinged racism that Senator Hanson has displayed against me and others. Thankfully, we have reached a crossroads in defining the kind of workplace we want to be. Whether we get there is another story. The recommendations of the Jenkins report are being implemented by the Parliamentary Leadership Task Force, and the Joint Select Committee on Parliamentary Standards is developing new codes of conduct for Parliament, parliamentarians and parliamentary staff. It is vital that we use these opportunities, which may not come again, to make Parliament more safe, respectful and diverse. Our codes of conduct must firmly prohibit racism in our workplaces. Anti-racism training must be mandatory for everyone who works here. Racism must be identified and called out every time, every single time that it happens in here or out there by anyone who works in this place. And people who spew such hate must face serious consequences. Now, I do understand that Labour has an amendment to my motion, and my motion probably is unlikely to get through. And I do have to call this out. I mean, the vague statement about respectful debate, which is all well and good, doesn't actually call a spade a spade. We heard 2 days in the parliamentary committee that is developing the codes, evidence from people who mentioned to us the best practice code of conducts, which call out behaviour like this and hold parliamentarians accountable. But we can't do that without agreeing to this motion that is in front of you. Labour's amendment really lets Senator Hanson off scot-free and gives her a free pass to do this again and again, as she has done in the past. This is not the standard we want to set in here or out there. We have to name and shame racism and the perpetrators of racism. Censuring Senator Hanson today is really the absolute bare minimum. It is a symbolic but important step that everyone in this place can take to make clear that we condemn racism in all its forms, shapes and sizes. It is a necessary step that we must take to show the many people of colour in this country that Parliament is a workplace that will not tolerate racism and that is simply not okay for anyone, but particularly people you work with, to racially vilify you. So I'll say it again. Racism must be identified and called out every single time, and people who spew such hate must face serious consequences. And this must start today. It can start today, not tomorrow, not next week, not next month, not next year. Today. This place needs to set the highest standard today for all others to follow.
Thank you, Senator Faruqi. Senator Wong.
Thank you. Well, first, I would like to move the amendment circulated in the chamber by myself and Senator Birmingham, and I acknowledge his willingness to co-sponsor, which, as people who might recall, is my preferred response on issues of race in this place, and was the way in which we sought to deal with the comments that Senator Anning, former Senator Anning, made. And I would make the point, it's been circulated, there are a few changes, but I would make the point that it also calls on the senators to refrain from inflammatory and divisive comments, both inside and outside the chamber. I'll make some comments in relation to the amendment of the primary motion generally. We are seeking to amend for two main reasons. First, we don't agree that the offending sentence should be repeated in this place. We don't think it should be repeated at all, much less in the Senate. Second, we don't think that a censure can be our default response in such a situation, particularly in reference to social media and other comments. But I do want to say to start with that I condemn Senator Hanson's comments without reservation. I think they're appalling. And they're comments that have been levelled at me countless times since I arrived in this country. I remember getting them when I was a kid in the schoolyard, and I've got them since. So they're not just the pathetic hecklings of a schoolyard bully. They are, as Senator Faruqi rightly said, something you say to delegitimise someone's right to speak. And I don't know what drives it. Perhaps it's the fear of anything different, different races, different ethnicities, different opinions. But can I say to Senator Faruqi, we on this side do understand your grievance at this comment, and we understand why you are calling out such behaviour. And I pick up something that Senator Faruqi said in her contribution about how triggering this is. It's true, it is. It is triggering each time you hear it. I'm the Senate leader. I still get triggered. And I wonder how it is for kids in the schoolyard who get the same thing. And I join the assurance that is in the motion that all migrants to Australia are valued and welcome members of society. I was reflecting when I saw the sort of media sort of focus on this about my first speech, because I actually talked about this experience, and I said, I asked the question in the speech, how long do you have to be here and how much do you have to love this country before you're accepted? How long? Well, I think the good news is I do actually believe the overwhelming majority of Australians are accepting. I think the overwhelming majority of Australians are accepting and respectful. And I would say also, regardless of our differences of views, I think the overwhelming majority of this chamber are accepting of peoples of different ethnic backgrounds. In relation to the workplace issue, the Parliament has been through a long and comprehensive review into Commonwealth parliamentary workplaces led by Kate Jenkins, the Sex Discrimination Commissioner, and she rightly described us as having an opportunity to transform this place into what it should be, workplaces where expected standards of behaviour are modelled, championed and enforced, and in which any Australian, no matter their gender, race, sexual orientation, disability status or age, feels safe and welcome to contribute. And she went on to say this aim is an important one because it is only by reflecting the whole of Australian society and living up to community expectations that Parliament can perform its function in a representative democracy. President, I think each of us in this place needs to take responsibility for our words and the impact of our words, and sometimes we say the wrong thing. Sometimes we do say the wrong thing. But we do have an individual and collective responsibility to act in a way that Australians would expect of us and that we would expect of our fellow Australians. And it is why, when confronted with such behaviour as we are describing, or words as we're describing, I think it's far preferable that the response is bipartisan. It's the approach, as I said, I took and with Senator Cormann when Senator Anning made his most egregious remarks several years ago. If I may repeat what I said on that occasion, I thought we there, in that debate and in that motion, made clear that we abhor racism and religious intolerance, that we acknowledge and celebrate diversity and the harmony of the Australian people. We stated our respect for people from all faiths, cultures, ethnicities and nationalities, a respect that has made our country one of the world's most successful migrant nations and multicultural societies. And we reaffirmed our commitment as Australians to peace over violence, innocence over evil, understanding over extremism, liberty over fear and love over hate. President, for our democracy to function well, we must treat each other as equals. It is true that freedom of speech is a feature of democracy, but speech which is directed at people's heritage or race or religion, it is an attack on democracy, because fundamentally what it is saying is you are not equal. And we must treat each other as equals, no matter the differences in our views. And such an approach, when we fail to do that, is not only diminishing of the other, it is actually diminishing of us all.
Thank you, Senator Wong. Senator Hanson.
Thank you very much. Well, this has just been hypocrisy. Pure, spectacular hypocrisy is the most fitting description for this ridiculous motion. Yeah. It is the most fitting description for the conduct of the Australian Greens. They embody hypocrisy. They signal it as a virtue. They claim they want Parliament to be a safe and respectful workplace. What they really mean is that no one must be allowed to disagree with or criticise them in any way, while they are free to say anything they please. This is because they see themselves as the epitome of virtue, who can say or do nothing wrong. Their sense of entitlement and privilege is stunning. I wonder if they read the Sydney Morning Herald this morning. There's a very interesting story in that newspaper detailing the conduct of one Green senator in this very building that is anything but respectful. It reports the co-chair of the First People's Assembly of Victoria, Auntie Geraldine Atkinson, aged in her 70s, was left shaking and ill to the point of requiring medical attention after being verbally abused by the Green Senator Lydia Thorpe in a meeting in this building last year. It reports Senator Thorpe's former Chief of Staff was actually scared and appalled at his senator's conduct, which he described as by far one of the most unprofessional displays I have ever seen, that made him want the earth to swallow him whole. Miss Atkinson herself described Senator Thorpe's conduct as vicious and personal and abusive, saying she accused Miss Atkinson of being involved in corrupt Aboriginal organisations. And listening to the stunning entitlement and privilege in this, when Miss Atkinson attempted to respond to this abuse, Senator Thorpe spoke over her in a highly aggressive tone, repeatedly saying, "I am an Australian senator. You are in my meeting." This came from the same Green who, in estimates committee hearing, told a minister she was offended by being referred to as an Australian. The despicable behaviour on the streets of Melbourne just recently, with showing even blood on her hands and the Crown's foot on your throat. You may have accused me of a lot of things in this place, what you referred to, but I have never acted in the behaviour that one of your Green senator has behaved. And you talk about my behaviour and what I've said. You may call me a racist,
Senator Hanson,
but you learn to make up—
may I remind you to address the chair with your remarks, please?
Thank you, Madam President. The whole thing is that to be called racist is very easily thrown about and bandied around in our country these days. People must understand what the word racist means. It means that you believe your race to be superior to another. I have never, ever, ever stated myself to be superior to another. Ever. Criticism is not racism. To question anything is not racism.
Senator Hanson, please resume your seat. I did ask, resume your seat. I did request that senators be heard in silence, and I would reiterate that request once again. Thank you. Please continue, Senator Hanson.
Thank you very much. This is coming from the same Green senator, and I spoke about Senator Thorpe. She's not missing.
Order.
She's not here. Senator Thorpe's not here today. Wonder why? Maybe the newspaper
Senator
article.
Hanson,
So
Senator
anyway,
Hanson,
I question why she's not here.
Please resume your seat. Senator McKim, I'm not entertaining a point of order. I've asked all senators to listen in respectful silence. I'm not entertaining a point of order. I said that before. I've asked you, and I'm directing you, to listen in respectful silence. You may not agree with what's being said, but you were heard in silence, and I expect silence from the chamber. Thank you, Senator Whish-Wilson. Senator Whish-Wilson, please resume your seat. Senator Whish-Wilson, I am directing you to resume your seat. This is a very difficult matter, and it is not assisted by cheering, by clapping, by comments across the chamber from any senator. I'm going to ask Senator Hanson to continue, and I expect Senator Hanson to be heard in silence. Senator Hanson.
Thank you very much. As I said, Senator Thorpe said she was offended by being referred to as an Australian. This is coming from the same Green who happily collects a $211,000 a year salary for sitting in a parliament she has called illegitimate.
Senator Hanson, I remind you it is not appropriate to reflect on other senators. I would ask you to withdraw that. Senator Hanson, I'm asking you, in the spirit of this debate, to withdraw that comment.
The fact is, she said
I'm
she
not
doesn't.
asking to you.
I just don't know. I made a couple
Senator
of sentences
Hanson,
there. So which one would you
Senator
like me to
Hanson,
refer?
I am asking you not to reflect on a senator in any way, and I'm simply asking you to withdraw.
I shall withdraw.
Thank you, Senator Hanson.
Pleasure.
Please
Thank
continue.
you. Isn't it funny? The Greens hate the Crown, but they love accepting the currency the Queen's image is printed on. And then, of course, there is her fellow Green Senator, Barouki. This Green implies a tweet I posted in response to her disrespecting the late Queen Elizabeth II was racist and disrespectful, and called for Parliament to be made a safe and respectful workplace. Let me read out what her comments were. Condolences to those who knew the Queen. I cannot mourn the leader of a racist empire built on stolen lives, land and wealth of colonised peoples. We are reminded of the urgency of treaty with First Nations people, justice and reparations for British colonies and becoming a republic. But only a matter of a couple of months earlier, to stand in this place and swear allegiance to the Queen and the heirs. And yet this turns around and says, from a racist and a coloniser, I just don't get it. I don't understand it. So here we have this same, and this is the same, Greens senator who posted a tweet telling the former Prime Minister of Australia to just F off. Now, this is directed at all Greens. You disgust the majority of the Australian people. The Greens are hated, loathed and despised by most Australians, not only for their outrageous destructive policies, but also because the Greens always insult Australians as racist and destroyers of the environment. They wear this hypocrisy as a badge of honour to display to their sycophants and young Australians being misled during their formative school years by left-leaning ideologists. I'm so grateful to the Greens for this idiotic stunt. It's time we had a real discussion about what constitutes racism. I didn't refer to Senator Faruqi's race or imply she had inferior characteristics due to her race or country of origin. I only suggested that because she is so obviously unhappy in her adopted country with her privileged position, she should go back to Pakistan. I remind the Senate that Senator Thorpe yelled at me in this very chamber to go back where I came from. As far as the Greens, I want to hear her reply to comment to a couple of members in this chamber, male members, "Oh, you're just white privileged." As far as the Greens are concerned, it's okay for them to say this, but it's not acceptable for me to say it. To them, only white people, including their own parliamentary leaders, can be racist and must not be allowed to say this. This is blatant, reversed racism, and I'm calling it out. I'm not remotely intimidated by Greens' threats and their stunning hypocrisy. With their threats, you're not just trying to silence me, you're also trying to silence the many thousands of Australians who feel frightened or intimidated by the likes of your lot to have an opinion, let alone open their mouth. Your intimidation, calling someone a racist to shut them up, is not only pathetic to say the least, it is a misuse of the true meaning of the word. Criticism is not racism. I am fed up, and so are millions of other Australians, with people who use their skin colour to play the victim. From the day I was first elected, I have always fought for equality for all Australians, regardless of race. At the last election, who stood second on the ticket to me in Queensland? A gentleman from India. My candidates have come from all different walks of background, all different races, but you're not interested in that. If I was a racist, I wouldn't have people from different cultural backgrounds. I do apologise for
Senator Hanson. Senator Hanson-Young, I said I wasn't entertaining points of order. This is a very difficult debate. I am listening very carefully, and I will ask senators to withdraw when I think they are out of order. Senator Hanson has not been doing that. She has been— order! This is not a debating point. Senator Hanson, that is not appropriate. I've asked— no, don't debate me. I've asked all senators to treat each other with respect, to have a respectful debate, one that's in silence. Please continue.
I remind the Greens that in exchange for the tremendous privilege of serving the Australian people in this chamber, they swore allegiance to the Queen and her successors. I remind them that it doesn't matter whether you think Australia should be a republic or that Australia only belongs to Indigenous people. Australia is a constitutional monarchy and belongs to every Australian, Indigenous or not. I reflect on Senator Wong's words about the racism that she feels she's been happened to her over the period of time and comments. I remember growing up in this country, the Italians used to say, "Oh, they call us a wog." I used to go to fish markets, and the guys down there say, "Yeah, but you know what? We wore it as a badge of honour to be called a wog." That was the Australian way. But you know what? Those people got out and worked. They felt part of the country. If you ask a lot of these people now, and I see the comments on my Facebook page from people with regard to this matter, actually, people said, "We're proud. We came to this country to be Australians." They love this nation, they've worked hard, and they see themselves as Australians. And that's all I've ever spoken about in a lot of my speeches that I've ever said. When I mentioned in my maiden speech about swamped by Asians, it was a comment about questioning the immigration that we had coming to Australia. I'll put this on the record again. I've spoken about it many times. is that we had high numbers coming from Asia. And I wanted to address this to say that we've got to look at this, otherwise we would have an imbalance in our population time to come. And it's the same thing as what Japan, they're very parochial on who they allow into the country. Why shouldn't I have the right to say who should come to the country? Even we've had former leaders of this nation say we have the right to say who comes to our country. But when Senator Hanson says it in such a way, my God, it's racist. We have to have this debate on who comes to the country and why they should come here. I've never, stated that Senator Faruqi shouldn't be here, but I was appalled, and so were many other thousands, if not millions of people, appalled by her comments in regards to the Queen less than a day after her death. I won't stand by and let that be said. And I had my tweet, and it's about time that, yes, Senator Faruqi made comments that people like myself should be pulled up. Well, even when people like her make her comments, I will still have my say and I will pull them up as well. This is a place, the heart of our democracy in this nation, and we are here to represent the Australian people. And it's when we acknowledge and accept that we all have an opinion and a right to say things, that's when we come to the right decisions for the people of this nation. They are looking at us as the leaders of this nation. My comments were not made in the chamber, they were said on a tweet in retaliation to her comments. Everyone has a right to have a say, but as I see the way this country is going, with a lot of other Australians, I see too much reverse racism. I see activists that are using their race and their colour to divide us as a nation, and I'll fight against that and I'll speak out against that every step of the way as I possibly can. So it is very important to me, and I'm privileged to be here. But I refuse to acknowledge the fact that I have been made these racist comments constantly, and I say to people, you really, and as I said to you, understand what the word racist means. Your race to be superior to another. You tell me anything since 1996 or before that I have said that is actually racist. Right? Not criticism of policy, not criticism of immigration, nothing at all. Understand the meaning, what the word racist, because you are putting out a message to many Australians there. If they disagree with you, then call them a racist. Our skin colour may be different, but we are all human beings in this place, and we have a right to a decent way of life and decent standard of living. We have all worked hard and should enjoy this wonderful country that we have without the hatred that goes on. It's about working together who we are as a nation. So until that changes, what we have in this country, and if your threats are trying to silence me, it's not going to damn well happen. So until that changes, you're here to do a job. Do your job and represent all Australians with the dignity and respect they deserve. In closing, as I have explained myself, I will not retract what I've told Senator Faruqi or any other Australian that's come here for a new way of life to disrespect what is Australian to me, and she can do and go where what I've said. I make the offer also to take her to the airport.
Senator Birmingham. Senator Birmingham, please resume your seat. Senator Steele-John, you may have missed what I said before. If you are in the chamber, you will listen in silence. You will not make points across the chamber. I'm going to call Senator Birmingham now, and I remind all senators once again, you are to listen in respectful silence. Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, President. Thank you, President. And I thank the government at the outset for their cooperation in the joint proposal of the amendments to this motion. At a time in which we see right around the globe enormous fracturing of politics, of the way in which politics is conducted, and indeed of media and media sources that provide for often ever more extreme, ever more conspiratorial or ever more offensive to other individuals remarks being perpetuated. It is important on occasions like this that the parties of government in a country like Australia speak with one voice when it comes to central and important values for our nation. And I make clear, as the motion as amended or proposed to be amended by Senator Wong and myself makes clear, that racism and discrimination have no place, in any place, anywhere, at any time, against anyone in our nation or elsewhere. There is certainly no place in this parliament for racism or discrimination. My personal experiences will self-evidently be vastly different to that of senators of other backgrounds who have confronted racism or discrimination leading to hurt, to injustice, to stereotyping or to prejudice. I say to all Australians, be they others in this place or elsewhere, be they Indigenous Australians or migrants to our nation throughout the generations, that you are all valued, that you are all important, that you are all and should all enjoy the rights and responsibilities accorded to all Australians. Rights and responsibilities in equal measure to all, regardless of their background. We all, in this great country, do have enormous rights accorded to us, enormous opportunities that are not available everywhere else around the world. But we carry some responsibilities too, and particularly the responsibilities to show respect. Respect to those rights, respect to the opportunities accorded to us, respect to the systems that have provided for those opportunities, and there ought be, with that, clear respect for one another. In this place, in this parliament, we enjoy certain privileged rights, enhanced rights, but also very clearly enhanced responsibilities for our conduct. And this parliament should, as per Sex Discrimination Commissioner's report, Sex Discrimination Commissioner Kate Jenkins' report last year, and its title, should set the standard. Now, that report focused on a range of different conduct issues, but frankly it should apply in all manner in relation to the way our nation engages. This place should set the standard in all of our conduct and on any of the issues and approaches that we undertake. Members and senators are, of course, free to seek change, but they should, in seeking change, respect the rights, the institutions, the practices that give them in this country the opportunity to seek those changes. Members and senators will disagree, but they should show respect for one another. President, my advice to senators of all stripes: stay out of the gutter, rise above the Twitterverse, play the ball, not the person. Even in the conduct of this debate, the interjections, the swipes, the insinuations, they have hindered, not helped, in the conduct of being able to make a clear statement in relation to the condemnation of racism, in relation to the assurance of all Australians, especially migrants, that they are valued and welcome, in relation to the importance of this parliament being a safe place to work, and in relation to making sure that it is clear for all senators to engage in debates respectfully. Please, look to the bigger picture, be the bigger people, that Australians of all views and values overwhelmingly want us to be.
Senator Gallagher.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that the question be put.
Thank you. So I remind senators there was an amendment in the names of Senators Wong and Birmingham, which I believe was circulated. So that is what we'll vote on first. So we'll go to the question of that amendment. Those of that opinion say aye. Aye. Against? Vote on the closure. Oh, beg your pardon. Yes, sorry. So the question is that the debate. The question is the motion is moved by Senator Gallagher to put the question be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Aye. Against? I believe the ayes have it. I'll now go to the amendment as circulated in the names of Senator Wong and Birmingham. Those of that opinion say aye. Aye. Against? I believe the ayes have it. We'll now go to the amended motion standing in the names of Senator Faruqi and Waters. Those of that opinion say aye. Aye. Against? I believe the ayes have it. Thank you, senators. Senator McKim.
Thank you, President. I'd like to take a point of order, if I might.
On what matter, Senator?
So, do I have the call to take a point of order?
Well, if it's on the matter we've just concluded, no.
Well, President, can I just suggest that 197.2 appears of the standing orders does allow me to make a point of order?
And it's also up to me whether I entertain a point of order.
Well, you haven't heard it yet, President. That's my
I'm not
point.
entertaining points of order about the debate we've just had, Senator McKim. That does not add any value at all.
I'll be writing to you on this matter, President.
Thank you. I'm happy to seek the advice of the clerk. I think we're taking note. Yes. So I'm going to call the